My name is Hailey, your guide to all things quirky in Minnesota's past. Your guide to the Superior Shipwreck, the legend of St. Urho, ancient agates, the Root Beer Lady, the Chief Buffalo Memorial Project, and to the history of Duluth's doomed Winter Olympics.
We need a time machine would be great. Yes, I would like a time machine myself.
Who hosted the 1932 Winter Olympics? Don't look it up on Wikipedia, you'll ruin the surprise. But here's a hint, it wasn't Duluth, Minnesota. Welcome to Minnesota Historia. I'm Hailey, your guide to the history of Duluth's doomed Winter Olympics. Oh, hello there. On January 10th, 1929, the Duluth Herald reported city leaders in Duluth were making a bid for the 1932 Olympics. And why not? Duluth has snow, it has ice, it has some hills, especially when compared to other cities in the state. But, and I am just playing devil's advocate here, are those hills big enough? If you average the elevations of our peaks and valleys, we're actually the 5th flattest state in the country. We're flatter than Kansas. Let that sink in for a second. Flatter than Kansas. On the other hand, those early Olympics were much smaller affairs. In 1932, only 251 athletes from 17 countries competed in 7 sports, plus a couple of demonstration sports, which were just sports they did for fun. They give you a faker, smaller medal. And in 1930, Duluth was the 90th largest city in the entire country. So, does that mean that this is doable? Maybe. Let's take a closer look at the sports. You've got your figure skating, your speed skating, and your bobsled, your ice hockey, your cross-country skiing, your ski jumping, and your Nordic combined, which is just cross-country skiing plus ski jumping. Yeah, I know, it's weird. But that's literally it. Only a couple of these sports require any sort of real elevation. But what about the demonstration sports? In 1932, you've got curling and dog sled racing. Yeah, I know. Curling and dog sled racing. Those are right up Duluth's alley. Maybe Duluth can pull this off? So in 1929, the city leaders of Duluth decided, sure, what the hey, let's throw our mucklucks into the ring. Put together one of these bids then there. Tell those nice Olympic folks over there in Switzerland that Duluth's got a couple of not too bad things going for itself right here. But still, it seems like such a long shot. Maybe I'm being too hard on Duluth's chances. To gain some perspective, I visited the Duluth Curling Club. They were hosting a party for Duluth's homegrown Olympic superstars, the U.S. curling team. I wanted to know if Duluth could host this thing today.
Should Duluth host the Winter Olympics? Absolutely yes.
Really? Oof. That ain't a dumb question. I think that's legit.
We obviously have a world-class curling club.
Long track's got to be out on the big lake.
We have enough hockey rinks.
It would be wonderful, but I don't think so.
Yeah, we probably don't have the money to do that.
I don't know if we have the infrastructure.
I'd like to say yes, but I think the scale of it these days is pretty insane.
So it might be a little difficult, but it would be really awesome to have it in my hometown.
Duluth would be an amazing host for the Winter Olympics. I mean, it'd be a little bit tricky with some of the skiing events.
The Winter Olympics today are a far cry from what happened in 1932. We need a time machine would be great. Yes, I would like a time machine myself.
Well, there you have it. That settled absolutely nothing. Maybe we should visit some of the venues the city leaders of Duluth were planning to use. This is where the Olympic curling event would have been held. No, not here in the parking lot. We take our curling seriously here. This is the original location of the Duluth Curling Club. Built in 1913, it was the largest curling facility on Earth. And why wouldn't it be? Then and now, Duluth has always been the curling capital of America. On its lower level, the original Duluth Curling Club boasted 12 sheets of ice and seating for 1,000 spectators. The second level had a rink for ice skating and hockey. But that wasn't the only ice in town. Due to the growing popularity of hockey, the amphitheater opened across the street in 1924. It offered seating for more than 4,000 hockey fans. And today, it's a grocery store. There's a museum-quality historical display in their entryway. above the motorized grocery carts. And you can still see a portion of the old amphitheater building along London Road. It's right here, underneath the cold cuts and potato salad. The University of Minnesota Duluth's first ever hockey team played here. They were nicknamed the PEDAGOGUES. It's a word that means teachers, and not whatever you were thinking. As for ski jumping, Duluth had Chester Bowl, a park established in 1888. By 1908, the Duluth Ski Club was already hosting the National Ski Jumping Championships. They hosted again in 1915, and 12,000 people filled grandstands and bleachers built for the occasion. That original ski jump blew down in 1916, but don't worry, Big Chester was built in 1924, with plenty of time for the Olympic bid. In the northern half of Minnesota, only 2 ski jumping facilities remain. One is here, in Cloquet, and the other is on the Iron Range in Coleraine. This is one of the ski jumps still standing in Cloquet. Duluth tore down the last of their ski jumps at Chester Bowl in 2014. And yeah, a lot of people are still bitter about it. Why can't we have nice ski jump things? But let's get back to the events. The John Bear Grace Sled Dog Race, which usually starts in Duluth, is considered the best sled dog event in the lower 48. And you can't throw a snowball in Duluth without hitting a cross-country ski trail. As for a bobsled run, Duluth didn't have one of those. But the city didn't have Spirit Mountain either. That wouldn't open until 1974. So there's a place to put the bobsled track. Maybe. Incredibly, it seems like Duluth does have enough venues to host this thing. But what about hotels? A common complaint in the early 1920s was that all of Duluth's biggest hotels were aging and located in a less desirable part of town. Its smaller hotels were more like boarding rooms, and Canal Park had industry on its mind more than tourists. Then, in 1925, came the Hotel Duluth, opulent, 14 stories tall. It boasted 450 rooms. That would have been on the city leaders' minds as they promised the International Olympic Committee enough rooms to accommodate 20,000 visitors. Speaking of visitors, in 1929, the Hotel Duluth briefly became famous thanks to an unusual guest, a 400-pound bear who was just traveling through town. He liked the smell of what the Hotel Duluth was cooking. He smashed a plate glass window and ransacked the coffee shop. So they shot him. Made all the papers. He was stuffed and displayed in their brand new Black Bear Lounge. That is not how the Hotel Duluth planned to treat its Olympic guests. So it seems like Duluth had everything in place to make a bid. There was only one thing standing in their way. So were a lot of other cities, including Montreal, Oslo, Denver, Minneapolis, Lake Tahoe, and Yosemite National Park. On April 10, 1929, the International Olympic Committee made its unanimous decision. They chose Lake Placid. And they'd choose them again in 1980. Heartbreaking. Oh, but don't worry, the story gets worse. The Duluth Curling Club moved to the deck in 1976, leaving their grand old building vacant. They would suffer a fire in 1984. In 1939, the amphitheater was still going strong when its roof started collapsing from all the snow, and this happened during a game. Fortunately, it all happened slowly enough that all but 4 people escaped injury. Just a reminder here, again, Duluth doesn't have any more ski jumps. At least the Hotel Duluth is still here. It's Gracelon Plaza now. And Duluth still has the snow, and the ice, and some hills. Those haven't gone anywhere. In 1936, the Winter Olympics permanently added downhill skiing as an event, thus ending the dream of Duluth ever hosting the Winter Olympics. But maybe, and just hear me out before you dismiss the idea outright, maybe we could host a World's Fair. Do they still do those?
I think so.
All right, a World's Fair. Don't go away, we have more episodes of Minnesota Historia coming up. The Great Lakes are home to more than 6,000 shipwrecks. Lake Erie has the most with 2,000, followed by Lake Michigan at 1,500. Lake Superior is home to just 400 wrecks, and it would be tasteless to turn this into some sort of ghoulish competition, but this lake has all the best shipwrecks, and it's not even close.
On board, set sail, ahoy, hooray, we're leaving home today, 'cause we're gonna sail away.
Ask people to name a shipwreck on the Great Lakes, and most people will say the Edmund Fitzgerald. It's famous. It's a tragedy, with 25-foot waves taking down the ship and its entire 29-person crew. It's the largest ship to ever wreck on Lake Superior. It happened somewhat recently, November 10th, 1975, and Gordon Lightfoot sings a really sad song about it. Honestly, the saddest part is that it was too rough to feed him. And if that's your favorite shipwreck story, you're not alone. But I have 5 more stories I'd like you to consider. Listen to them, memorize them, share them at cocktail parties to win friends and influence people. The S.S.ONOKO was the first iron-hulled steamer on Lake Superior. She's the grandmother for all bulk freighters that you see today. But in early September of 1915, she ran aground in Duluth's harbor. Nothing to worry about. She freed herself, but then, on September 15th, the Onoko, leaving Duluth with a load of grain, sprung a leak near Knife River. Again, nothing to worry about. I mean, the ship was sinking, but the entire crew calmly and safely abandoned ship before it disappeared. And then everyone promptly forgot where they left it. How do you lose a whole ship in a lake? It happens all the time. Fortunately, we have people who specialize in finding them again. This is Jerry Eliason, a shipwreck hunter and photographer.
The Onoko was the first offshore wreck that we found. We vowed that no matter what, we weren't going to stop looking for the Onoko till we found it.
He discovered her back in 1988.
We bought a $149 paper graph fish finder and decided that if we went back and forth enough times, we'd sooner find it.
I like Jerry. Don't worry, we'll talk to him again later. Before the last voyage of the Benjamin Noble, a customs officer in Conneaut, Ohio told her captain, "I should not like to ride with you. You're overloaded."
That thing was way the heck overloaded. I mean, it was almost sinking at the dock.
It was young Captain Eisenhardt's first commission, and he couldn't say no to all those tasty iron rails.
Tasty iron rails.
So he left for Duluth, promising his crew they'd take it easy. They made it all the way to Knife River, Minnesota.
It was a late April snowstorm, and they had 12, 15-foot waves out there.
The Benjamin Noble simply disappeared. There were no survivors.
And that was another one of those went missing wrecks. Went missing ship is one that went down without witnesses and went down with all hands. Finding them is extra difficult.
It wasn't until 2004 that Jerry and his team discovered the Benjamin Noble. By that time, she'd been missing for 90 years.
The Benjamin Noble was definitely one of the holy grails or Loch Ness monsters. That's what shipwreck enthusiasts say when it's a ship that has extra significance.
Maybe it's the name Knife River that keeps dooming these ships. Can we get a town on Lake Superior that sounds a little more gentle? Okay. The Lotta Bernard was a steamer with paddle wheels, so possibly too cute for Lake Superior? Lotta left Thunder Bay October 29th, 1874, loaded with 200 sacks of flour, 60 kegs of fish, 1 horse. As she passed Castle Danger, huge waves pounded her deck, smashed her cabins. Only her smokestack and deck remained. Of the 15 people on board, 12 would survive. No word on what happened to the horse. Survivors rowed ashore on a lifeboat and took shelter in an Ojibwe camp.
So the Lotta Bernard, yeah, that would be a nice one to find. The little one, that makes it harder. You know, small wooden ships on rugged bottoms are really tough.
Today, the Lotta Bernard remains a ghost ship. But don't worry, that's just what we call shipwrecks that haven't been found yet. So there's nothing scary about ghost ships at all. The SS Hudson is the scariest ghost ship story I have ever heard. The Hudson left Duluth September 15th, 1901. By the time she reached the Apostle Islands, the weather turned foul. The next day, lighthouse keepers in Eagle River, Michigan reported seeing Hudson dead in the water and listing badly. Eventually, she rolled over and sank, taking all 25 crew members with her. But here's the spooky part. Every year on September 16th, the anniversary of her sinking, the SS Hudson rises from her watery grave and appears to sailors on Lake Superior. No, I didn't believe this either. until I read an account by a tugboat captain in the 1940s. This captain, along with a crewmate, reported seeing a rusty ship covered in brown slime heading directly towards them. Narrowly avoiding a collision, the captain boarded the ship to see if the crew was in distress. They were. They were ghosts. They told the captain they were doomed to relive the sinking of their ship every September 16th. And rightfully, in a panic, the tugboat captain dove into the frigid water to get away from the Hudson quickly. Very, very quickly. The Hudson was missing for 118 years, until Jerry Eliason found her in 2019 at a depth of 800 feet. It's one of the deepest shipwrecks ever found in Lake Superior.
2 years in a row, it was our intention to be out there on the anniversary of the sinking to disprove the story that it rises on that day. And both times we had too rough of weather to go.
Oh, God. I find this last shipwreck to be the saddest of them all because of a message found in a bottle. I'm just going to skip ahead to the bad parts. On the evening of December 6th, 1927, the SS Kamloops was last seen heavily coated with ice, steaming towards Isle Royale. The 22 men and women aboard were never seen alive again. In May 1928, several bodies were found at 12 o'clock point on Isle Royale. More were discovered in June for a total of 9. That December, a trapper working the shore of Lake Superior in Ontario found a message in a bottle from Alice Bettridge, young steward who initially survived the sinking and swam ashore. She wrote, "I am the last one left alive, freezing and starving to death on Isle Royale in Lake Superior. I just want my mom and dad to know my fate." Yikes, that's horrifying. The fate of the Kamloops was unknown for 50 years. Her wreck finally discovered in 1977, with some of the crew members' remains still on board.
Well, it's the final chapter. It's like there's this story that started 100 years ago, 120 years ago, and it stopped at that point, but it's not over. The story's not over. And then here, 110, 20, 30 years later, we got the final chapter.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some haunting sea shanties that need listening to.
On board, set sail, ahoy, hooray, we're leaving homes today, 'cause we're gonna sail away.
This is Finland. Minnesota, a town of nearly 200 people.
St. Urho's Day! Woo!
Today is St. Urho's Day, and the town of Finland is having a parade to honor the country of Finland's beloved patron saint. It's a wholesome event, fun for the whole family.
I love the parade. Even when my family's dead, I'll still go here.
Cities across the world hold similar celebrations every year to honor St. Urho. It's a lovely tradition, except, of course, the story of St. Urho is all a web of lies. Welcome to Minnesota Historia. I'm Hailey, your guide to the legend of St. Urho.
So when I was a kid, I thought Urho's was real. Then I was told, yeah, this is all made up.
Well, as far as I know, it's true.
I think he is real. I think.
No, this is a Northland, what do you call it, fairy tale.
To those disciples who believe in him, he's as real as the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus.
Okay, so St. Urho is actually my uncle.
St. Urho was invented out of thin air in the mid-1950s by Richard Mattson in Virginia, Minnesota. Here is Finland, and here's Virginia. I don't like how many of these towns in Minnesota are named after other countries and states. Richard Mattson and Jean McCavick were co-workers at Catola's department store in downtown Virginia. McCavick had been ridiculing poor Mattson because Finland doesn't have any good saints. But in 1950, Finland was 95% Lutheran, with almost no Catholics. Meanwhile, Ireland has plenty of Catholics and a patron saint. Perhaps you've heard of him.
Well, I'm St. Patrick, and I drove the snakes out of Ireland.
So, a jealous Matson told McCavick, Finland has great saints. McCavick asked Matson to name one. He couldn't. So, he made one up.
So I said, we have St. Urho. I told her he drove the poisonous frogs from Finland before the last ice age.
That's from an interview with Richard Matson, recorded by Finn Lager for the Iron Range Research Center. The original ode to St. Urho was inspired by Matson and written by McCavick on a spare sheet of wrapping paper in a wildly offensive approximation of Finnish dialect. So let's give a cheer in Hauerpest way on May 24th, St. Urho's Day. Yeah. According to the original text, Finland was overwhelmed by poisonous frogs. So, St. Urho consumed sour milk and fish soup, and his voice became so loud that it scared the frogs away. Finland was finally free of frogs. And that's exactly how everyone in the world still tells the story to this day.
Well, the story is he chased all the grasshoppers out of it and saved the grapes.
He drove away all the grasshoppers out of Finland.
The grasshoppers were eating all the grapes, like all of them.
St. Urho.
St. Urho
saved the grasshoppers.
The crops.
The crops. Yep.
From the grasshoppers.
The grasshoppers were eating all the grapes.
Chased all the grasshoppers
so they chased them away, yep.
And how did he do this?
Well, they gave him jello shots.
Grasshoppers? Jello shots? It's hard to keep a good story straight. 200 miles to the west, a professor in Bemidji, Minnesota, named Sulo Havumäki, decided to tweak the tale slightly. Some people even claim that he invented St. Urho. Maybe. But he almost certainly added the grasshoppers. And a catchy chant. Heinasirka, Menetulta, Haitin. In English, that translates to grasshopper, grasshopper, go away. So now it's grasshoppers instead of frogs. And grapes are involved. Couple more things you should know about St. Urho's Day.
Well, you got to dress in purple and green.
Purple for the grapes, green for the grasshoppers.
Somewhere along the line, it got changed to the day before St. Patrick's Day, which gives you one more excuse to go out and drink funny-colored beer.
Monaga, Minnesota also has a parade, and a really nice statue. Even nicer than the one in Finland, Minnesota. St. Urho's Day is now officially recognized in all 50 states. This totally made-up fake holiday became so popular here that it eventually immigrated back to Finland, where it is celebrated sporadically.
It has gone international so much, it'll always be, it'll always exist. That's true. This crazy thing is going to live.
I just can't help it.
It's a good thing you didn't start a new religion, I think.
Could have been easy. I really would.
I mean, I guess it's nice the Finns have a phony patron saint and an additional excuse to drink. But why has this particular story resonated so much with so many Finns for so many years? Well, life was hard for Finnish immigrants here in the early part of the 20th century. By 1920, 18,000 Finns had emigrated to St. Louis County in Minnesota. They liked our lakes, our trees, and our boulders, but the other people here didn't always like them. This is Steve Sokola. You might remember him from earlier, playing an accordion and skateboarding at the same time. You can trust a man who plays an accordion and skateboards at the same time.
Well, this is vague but historically accurate. A lot of Finns who are in the mines, they struggled to speak the other languages that the other half of the melting pot was a part of. So they tried to start up their own unions to protect each other, and mining companies didn't like unions at the time. So a lot of Finns got blackballed from the mines and started farming in these communities. So that's why Embarrass and Palwa and Toivola, places like that, are places where Finnish farmers settled when they couldn't find success at the mine.
In 1918, a Finnish American named Olli Kinkkinen was lynched in Duluth for being a pacifist. Fast forward 30 years, or 50, or 100, Finns still remember those persecutions. They needed a good reason to get together and celebrate each other. So someone had to make one up.
When it's as cold as it is in Minnesota, you tend to make up holidays, so you got some reason to stay alive in these cold months.
So we still have a parade, and we have some music, and we have vittles, you know, and everybody just kind of hangs out.
A lot of Finnish people celebrate St. Urho's, and I'm Finland. I'm a Finnish person. Yeah.
Everybody is Finnish today. Even if they aren't yesterday or tomorrow, they're today.
That's a really nice sentiment. I think I'm going to let her have the last word on St. Urho.
Even when my family's dead, I'll still go here.
Don't go anywhere. There's more quirky stories of Minnesota's history coming up.
Prior to the mural project, this walkway was all beige. Wonderfully beige. You can see remnants of the beige over there. The entire thing always gave me prison vibes. But in a way, like the beige contributed to that. It made this not a space where you could picture anything good happening, I guess.
Welcome to Minnesota Historia. I'm Hailey, your host to history, and this is the Chief Buffalo Memorial Project.
I really felt like this space could promote being able to have a broader perspective and understanding and picture of the history that we all share here.
This is Mary Villiard, a visual artist in Duluth, Minnesota. She collaborated with Chief Buffalo's eldest descendants and many other artists to make this project happen.
The Zeitgeist Center for Art, they reached out to the Indigenous Commission. Indigenous Commission submitted a list of topics. I don't remember what the other topics were because it was just like, Chief Buffalo, I'm doing this.
You see Mary's work all over Duluth. She often uses art to uplift underrepresented narratives. And Chief Buffalo's narrative is seriously underrepresented.
You know, I'd heard the name Chief Buffalo kind of tossed around, and I knew we were on ceded territory, but I wasn't sure what any of that really meant. I feel like most people don't know, you know.
I didn't know. And Chief Buffalo's story is the origin story of downtown Duluth. But good luck finding him on any of the historical markers in the city. Or its public art. Until now, obviously.
Yeah, Chief Buffalo, let's backtrack. How do we start it?
Chief Buffalo was born on Madeline Island around the year 1759. 1759, that's before the Revolutionary War. At the time, Madeline Island was supposedly a part of New France. New France. Of course, we have to acknowledge this was all Ojibwe land. That's why the United States had to make so many treaties.
This wall is still in progress. It's a map of the different treaty territories. Anywhere you go in the United States, it's like there's some sort of treaty that is the law of the land that allows it to exist. Treaties don't give rights to Native people. It's actually the opposite. It's the tribes giving rights to settlers, basically, to exist like in the same space as them.
Chief Buffalo led the Lake Superior Ojibwe for nearly half a century, signing a series of treaties with the United States between 1825 and 1847. Minnesota Territory was established on March 3, 1849, and Minnesota became a state May 11, 1858. In between those two dates, you will not be shocked to learn that a lot of nefarious happened.
So Minnesota's still a territory. They've got written into law plans to remove Ojibwe people from Minnesota because they're like, look at all this land, like this is gonna be ours. They come up with this scheme and it's like, it's documented, like they intentionally moved the point at which Ojibwe people could get their allotments, which were like, you know, food rations and things like that, because obviously they're like blocking Native people from accessing the land and using it themselves. So they need allotments and rations for food. They moved that point up to Sandy Lake.
Sandy Lake is not close to Madeline Island or Lake Superior. It's not close to anything. Look, I'm sorry if you live there now, but at the time, its remoteness was the whole point of it.
It's hard to picture when you're talking about it, like, oh, they had to go for a walk to this place. Well, it was months of walking, you know? And so people went on this journey, they get there and the food was intentionally like poisoned. It was literally rotten food. And so people died from that. And then they had to make the journey back and over 300 people end up dying on this journey. It was called the Sandy Lake tragedy or the Ojibwe Trail of Tears, killing people off like slowly. All intentionally orchestrated by the Governor Ramsey, who a lot of our places are named after. And so Chief Buffalo saw this. He's about 90-something years old. He decides he wants to do something about it and gets the support from all the different tribal communities in the region, to make this trip to Washington, D.C. to tell the president, this just happened, our people are being killed here, and we don't want to be moved anymore. That pictograph that's right there was the pictograph that he carried on his journey to Washington, D.C. Symbolically, it's basically a representation of all the different tribal leaders kind of like signing off, so their hearts and minds connecting to the crane. A lot of people think that the crane represented Chief Buffalo. He was actually Loon Clan. You see the strand that's coming out of the eyes, basically, the vision of the crane connects to whoever is holding the pictograph. And so Chief Buffalo is the one that is holding the pictograph. And so the art is like this moving piece that like whoever holds it is the voice of all of the folks there. So along the way, people hear about this elderly man going on this quest. And so people are like expressing their support, and word gets to the president, and the president meets with him. And in that meeting, we get the Treaty of 1854, which establishes a lot of the tribal reservations that we have in our region across Minnesota.
The Treaty of 1854 guaranteed that Ojibwe people would not be moved west at a later date. They also retained their rights to hunt, fish, and participate in traditional activities. Of course, Minnesota ignored that part of the treaty until they were sued.
Then on the red, you see the different reservations, essentially.
Please note that downtown Duluth is not in red on this map. In 1854, Chief Buffalo was given his choice of land in northeastern Minnesota.
I think Point of Rocks was the point at which it was kind of like, look out from here and from this spot to this spot. And what now is Duluth, the president was like, here's this plot of land, and you can use it, you know, for whatever, kind of whatever you want. It's Chief Buffalo's reservation. He ended up, I think, giving that plot of land to his son-in-law, Benjamin Armstrong. And then from there, it's kind of like, what happened? I don't know.
Yeah, it gets murky. According to the Duluth Herald, someone sprinkled an unidentified powder into Armstrong's eyes while he was asleep. He went blind. Seeking money for medical treatment, he sold off his land to several traders. At least one of them never even paid him.
There's a lot of different stories about, you know, what went on, but essentially, we're in Duluth now.
Which brings us to 2018, when the Duluth City Council renamed Lake Place Park, a forgettable string of nouns, to Gitche-O-Dea King, which means a grand heart place.
And so that was another initiative by the Indigenous Commission that took almost a decade to get through to the city that this would be renamed.
The Chief Buffalo Memorial Project began the following year on a beige walkway that connects Gitche-O-Dea King to the Lake Walk.
I think once the naming of Gitche-O-Dea King happened, things started like setting into motion in ways that people maybe didn't expect, which is the significance of an action like that. Something as simple as changing a place name suddenly piques people's interest enough to support a project that moves the park a little bit further down, or that recognition further down.
Did you do this? This feels like maybe a rice field.
Yeah, it is. So ricing, we got a powwow, a sugar bush on the side.
Yeah.
I didn't do all of them, I have help, so community helped paint this one. We've got 2 artists from North Dakota who came up and did this. Oh, yeah. When I do mural projects, we spend a lot of time as like tour guides telling people what is the significance of this project and answering questions. So we have the Thunderbird, a water panther, and so they're like Ojibwe sort of mermaids. We did this community painting session. We got the loon for Chief Buffalo. This is Herb Finde and his son, Ricing. This is a youth at a powwow. Jonathan Thunder and Tashia Hart. I wanted it to be immersive, and I wanted it to not just talk about like Chief Buffalo, but like there's pieces that are like people who are alive here today. I think it's Arnie Vinio and Jim Northrup at a sugar bush, but it's just their feet. So, and then secretly kind of back here, this is Chief Buffalo smoking his pipe. The Buffalo family also really wanted Chief Buffalo to be remembered in this space, and to see something about his story here, because he does have that kind of Duluth connection. So yeah, that's why Chief Buffalo's murals are here.
The thing I like about studying Minnesota history is the feeling that you're traveling through time. Sometimes it's just a few decades, could be more than a century, but today we are going all the way back to the beginning. No, further than that. Welcome to Minnesota Historia. I'm Hailey, your guide to ancient agates. This is Moose Lake, Minnesota, a small town of nearly 3,000 people with a moose, a lake, a charming movie theater, a mouth-watering pizzeria, And for one day every July, a street full of rocks and eager agate hunters. This is Agate Days, and these rock hounds are here for one reason: to find a Lake Superior agate in the agate stampede. Not diamonds, not gold, agates. The common person's gemstone. Lakers, Minnesota gold. This raises questions like, why? What's the deal here? What am I not getting? What's so great about these agates? Why are people so obsessed with them? We'll get back to those questions later. But first, where do Lake Superior agates come from? Yes, I realize a dump truck brought those particular rocks to this street in Moose Lake. I'm talking about the origin of agates in a larger, older geological sense. For that, we have to go back 1 billion years. That's when lava last flowed in northeastern Minnesota, as tectonic forces ripped North America apart and created the Superior Trough. As this lava cooled, it left millions of tiny little adorable air pockets inside of it. Dirty, rusty groundwater flowed into these pockets and deposited layers of quartz and other dissolved minerals over thousands of years. Your classic Lake Superior agate is made up of these colorful layers of quartz, usually orange, red, and yellow, because they're stained by iron. Lake Superior agates earned their name because they're so often found on the shores of Lake Superior. Thanks to the last ice age, you can also find them in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Iowa. Ice ages are like giant free-range rock tumblers, gobbling up our precious goodies and depositing them all over the Midwest. But the biggest and arguably the best Lake Superior agates are found just a few miles south of Lake Superior, in the gravel of Carleton County, Minnesota, which is where Moose Lake is. Moose Lake, known to agate hunters as the agate capital of the world, and for good reason. You've got your Agate Days with your agate stampede. You've got your 108-pound agate on display in the bank. Some say it's the largest in the world. And you've got the Moose Lake Agate and Geological Center. It's a museum and resource center located here in Moose Lake State Park. They are pretty, aren't they? This is Roger Beeble, a geologist and member of the Carleton County Gem and Mineral Club. He helps make Agate Days and the Agate Stampede happen.
This was started 50 years ago, and now we've become so big that we have to rent out the Riverside Arena, the hockey arena here in Moose Lake. I got involved with this. My mentor was Tom Olson. They started this in 1972, so they asked me if I wanted to do the Agate Stampede. As a geologist, they knew that I would be able to help out in many things. Sandstones, this is rhyolite. And I said yes, and it's been going on since.
Roger took us to the Agate Stampede's secret headquarters, where they were loading 2 trucks with rocks.
Oh, the agates we used to buy for $1 a pound 10 years ago, and it went to $2 a pound. Now it's $3 a pound. Plus I have $500 in quarters and halves that we also put in, so that the kids get the quarters and halves. So there's our trucks, all spiffed up and everything. They're probably like, where the hell is that guy?
I was just wondering, where the hell is that guy? These agate hunters can be a secretive bunch.
There's supposed to be 100 of these. I'll just pull up by the white one, and then one of you guys will be up there to... Yep. There's no science to it. We're mixing 3/4 inch rock and 1 1/4 rock because the agates are that size, so they don't stick out like sore thumbs. We put out 24 cubic yards of gravel in those 2 trucks, and then this year 500 pounds of agates and $500 in quarters. I hope it goes good.
So the agates are mixed in the rocks, and the rocks are dumped on the street. Now, who wants to see an agate stampede?
So the kids have a great time here. Every rock has a story because picking up these rocks, you can tell if they're igneous, sedimentary, the three types of rocks, or metamorphic, and where they come from. And it tells the whole geology of that area. But we have it all here. We have all the different types of rocks.
Ah, look at that. I just found an agate. If you want to find your own agate, I do have some tips. Hunt on sunny days. Quartz is translucent. It sparkles just a little bit in the sun.
And so once you get the eye for it, you'll see the translucence, you'll see this color, and you can find them real easily.
It all depends on the glasses you wear too.
I can see that from way over there because it's translucent.
Go where the gravel is. Keep an eye out for gravel trucks replenishing roads, driveways, parking lots, or the shoulders of highways. Fresh gravel means fresh agates.
And this big rock here is used for building sewer mounds. Oh, there you go. See, there's the agate he just found.
Don't forget, Lake Superior agates were stained by iron. Look for a rusty red. That's the most common color in a Lake Superior agate. In 1969, the Minnesota legislature named the Lake Superior agate the state's official gemstone.
And so Tom Olson actually went down and gave agates to all the members of the state Senate and House and got that voted in as the state stone.
Free agates? Is that even legal? Speaking of bending the law, agate hunting is very much illegal in many places in the state. Gravel pits now have to post signs forbidding it. And you can't hunt for agates in state parks, no matter how big or beautiful they might be. Look, I've only been an agate hunter for about 90 seconds now, but even I can tell you why so many people are obsessed with it. It's fun to find shiny stuff outside. And if you find yours on a beach or in some overturned gravel, you might be the first human person to touch that agate in its entire billion-year existence. Think about that. A dinosaur might have peed on your agate. Don't go anywhere. We have more episodes of Minnesota Historia coming up.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Imagine if Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin had arrived on the moon on July 20th, 1969, and had found an axe-wielding 79-year-old woman selling candy bars and homemade pop.
That's kind of unexpected.
I'm just trying to give you some sense of the absolutely magical feeling that paddlers in the Boundary Water Canoe area experienced when they discovered the root beer lady. Welcome to Minnesota Historia. I'm Hailey, your guide to the root beer lady. This is the Boundary Waters Canoe Area, a 1.1 million acre wilderness on the Canadian border in northern Minnesota. And this is Dorothy Moulter, the Boundary Waters' last permanent resident. She lived here for more than 50 years. Now she has her own brand of root beer, her own museum, and a photo with Julia Roberts. Julia's on the left. She was on a youth group canoe trip to the Boundary Waters, and she wasn't famous yet, but Dorothy was. Here's how she got started.
I come up here in 1930 for the first time with my dad, my mother, my uncle. That should be okay. And of course, this kind of country was all new to me, coming from the city and never going out to picnics or nothing. I was never in a canoe till I come up here.
Dorothy's family spent summers at the Isle of Pines resort on Knife Lake. This is where Dorothy's cabin was.
After about 3 or 4 summers, I decided I wanted to see what it was like in the wintertime. So I made a trip up here.
Dorothy was fascinated to see how people lived year-round at the edge of civilization.
It was mostly all men when I first come up here. I was listening to the guys talking about cutting ice, putting up ice. And of course, we used some of their ice in the summertime, but we had no idea how they got it up here.
With great difficulty.
I used to like to stand by and watch those fellas. Now the main thing we need ice for is for keeping the root beer cold.
Dorothy had trained in Chicago to be a nurse. But in 1934, she moved to the Isle of Pines resort for good. In 1948, owner Bill Berglund died and left the resort to Dorothy. The U.S. Forest Service offered to buy the resort immediately. She politely declined. In 1949, Harry Truman banned float planes, and in the mid-1950s, she started making her own root beer because she couldn't bring it in via float plane.
I used to have pop up here, but after the planes quit flying, well, then I discontinued it because I wasn't about to pack pop over the portages. So I had so many root beer bottles on hand, we got the idea of making root beer.
In 1964, Congress passed the Wilderness Act, and Dorothy was forced to sell a resort to the U.S. Forest Service. They agreed to let her stay on the property, temporarily, but she never left. It can be hard to visualize how remote the Boundary Waters truly are. Dorothy lived 15 miles from the nearest road. Motorized boats were restricted in 1978, snowmobiles in 1984. It took 5 overland portages just to get home. A portage is whenever you have to carry your canoe between bodies of water, like this guy. I always volunteer to carry the paddles.
Ely, this is Knife Lake.
Knife Lake, Ely, go ahead.
I have a message for Jerry.
It's worth noting that the Forest Service actually liked having Dorothy in the Boundary Waters. I mean, who wouldn't? Who doesn't like root beer? Who doesn't like having a nurse in the middle of your giant, dangerous forest?
Okay, Dorothy, I can give them the message.
Yeah.
They eventually gave her a 2-way radio and called her a volunteer in service. When she wasn't nursing, or gardening, or feeding her ducks, or visiting her friends who stopped by, Dorothy was making her root beer and then giving it away. Of course, she left out a tip jar for donations. It was the same way she'd run a resort, just barely legal. Dorothy's secret recipe wasn't really a secret either. She'd buy syrup from A&W or the grocery store in Ely, then add sugar and yeast. The water came from Knife Lake, but she had to carry everything else to her island. In fact, she was once attacked by a bear while portaging candy bars. No, not that bear. This bear came from behind the bushes and ripped the pack right off her back. She tracked it down later. The bear was picky. Didn't even eat all the candy bars. Only in the Boundary Waters could you buy candy bars in the middle of the woods with teeth marks on them, and you'd be happy about it. This is Jess Edberg, the executive director at the Dorothy Moulter Museum in Ely, Minnesota. She knows a lot about Dorothy.
And this is where Dorothy would sell root beer out of.
And the former Isle of Pine Resort. I like to call her the root beer lady.
At our museum, we have 3 of Dorothy's historic cabins. After Dorothy's passing in 1986, a group of her friends and supporters salvaged what they could from her property up on Isle of Pines.
These cabins were dismantled, so log by log, taking them apart, windows out, and they were labeled with metal tags. And then you can put the puzzle back together exactly the way you had it.
You can still buy Dorothy's root beer at the museum and at stores all over northeastern Minnesota. It's always delicious, which is a pleasant surprise to some because Dorothy's root beer was sometimes, how should I put this? Dorothy would occasionally have quality control issues.
It was not uncommon for people to experience what you might call a dud bottle.
The recipe called for her bottled root beer to ferment for at least 3 days and as much as 2 weeks.
Given the fact that Dorothy, especially in the last 10 years of her life, was incredibly busy with visitors coming just to get a bottle of root beer and meet her, she might have 200 people stopping by every day. And it wouldn't have been uncommon for her to mix up a couple crates of root beer on a Tuesday and then have to serve it on a Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning.
Ferment faster.
If you boys are waiting for root beer, I'm all out of it.
That's okay.
But there's candy in the house.
The fun of it, of meeting Dorothy, of going to Dorothy's Islands, of finding this oasis that had candy bars in the middle of nowhere. After days of paddling, mosquitoes, thunderstorms, it was phenomenal. It was more of an experience than the taste of the root beer.
I feel bad that I brought it up.
She can be inspirational for a lot of different communities, especially marginalized communities. She really represents women who are resisting the heteronormative gender roles that are kind of put on women sometimes. She kind of bucked that system and decided to take her own path
And for her to do that in the 30s and 40s is a really big deal.
Thanks for watching. I'll see you later. Love you. Okay, bye.